Can you start by just telling us who you are and where you are?
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Katy Weber, and I am an ADHD advocate and a podcast host. I host the podcast Women in ADHD, which I started in December of 2020. It's now among the top 0.5% of podcasts globally. I live in the Hudson Valley in New York, which is outside of New York City. I'm
Yeah.
married. I have two teenagers and a whole bunch of pets.
And what got you into the whole ADHD world?
It was really a situation where I was diagnosed over the pandemic in 2020 and I was home. It was such a profound experience for me in terms of this diagnosis. It was such a positive experience. When I was telling people I have ADHD, there was two different reactions. Some people who knew about ADHD would say, "Congratulations." Like they knew
One in
how
the
important a
tribe.
diagnosis was,
Yeah.
right? And the other people who didn't really understand it would say things like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was struggling. Now I feel like finally a window has opened." And it was just this incredible experience. I really just wanted to have conversations with other women who were diagnosed in adulthood and find out I can't be the only one who had this experience. And clearly I'm not. But yeah, that was how it started. I just wanted an excuse to talk to other women during the pandemic.
How many women have you talked to in these 4 years?
At least. One of the things I think that I love about my podcast, the format or the setup, I really love talking to just regular, average, everyday women. While I do also love talking to professionals in the field, clinicians, psychologists, authors, I love interviewing experts. One of the things I love even more is interviewing just regular women and hearing their experience and talking about what were those symptoms that made you look into this. I think listeners hear themselves in my guests. One of the things I love about the podcast is the fact that it's so symbiotic. I get so much out of being an interviewer and asking the questions. I think the guests get so much out of sharing their story. The listener also gets so much out of this, hearing that validation and hearing themselves in these other women. They reach out to me and say, I would also like to share my story. But then it's this sort of domino effect of that desire to help other women, especially when you've been diagnosed in adulthood. So those are my favorite guests.
What were you doing before you started this podcast, and what led to your diagnosis?
I was a stay-at-home mom who was the president of the PTA during the pandemic. We were just about to put on our big grade 3 musical, and it all got shut down literally the night of our dress rehearsal. We were told, "You're not performing. That's it. School's done." This was March of 2020. And we were home. I just had a bit of a meltdown and was talking to my therapist about how really struggling a lot of women where I was the mom, the cook, the teacher, the housekeeper, everything, and trying to juggle all of these roles. And I just felt like I was in suspended animation. I felt like I couldn't do anything. I kept waiting. My kids kept interrupting me. Oh, the Wi-Fi's out. I can't get on Zoom. All of these crazy things that were happening during that time. And at the same time, I was trying to revitalize my coaching business because I had been a health coach for binge eating recovery, which is another one of those things that I'm like, oh, that makes sense as to why that was something I did before my diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it was a situation where my therapist had been telling me over the years she thought I might have ADHD, and I was always insulted. I was like, "What do you think about me?" I was like, "I'm not hyper. I don't know what you're talking about." I had the same stereotype of somebody with ADHD can't keep their stuff together and they're all over the place. Why would you think I have ADHD? I just didn't understand it and dismissed it. When I was trying to explain to her the fact that I was trying to start a new business while also doing all of this at home and feeling very paralyzed by the interruptions and the inability to concentrate, she was like, please look up ADHD. I took a general ADHD test from Attitude Magazine's website, which is mostly the DSM questions. I didn't relate to it. I scored maybe like a 50% or something. I didn't feel like this was it. Then I took Sari Solden's test for women. I aced that one. I got like almost 100% because she really talks about the shame and a lot of the emotional stuff and the sensory stuff. She connected the dots for me. That was so important. I was like, that's ADHD. Wait, like all of these seemingly random struggles I had over the course of my entire life. All of a sudden, everything fell under this one umbrella.
When you look back at yourself as a child in grade school or middle school, do you now recognize some symptoms of ADHD?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The signs really were there all along. I'm very grateful for my mother who kept all of my report cards. I was really lucky. I was able to go through my report cards. It was really emotional. I cried. There was a lot of grief because I saw a very young girl who was told she was a natural leader. She was very bright. She was enthusiastic. She was a quick reading, had all of these skills. And then around the third grade, I was put into the gifted program. Around that time that my teacher started saying things on my report card, she has so much potential. Yeah. And they would say things like, she does a great job, but there would be this list of she's disorganized or her handwriting, and all of these things that I look back and I'm like, really? I just saw this poor kid getting beaten down through these comments over the years. By the time I was in high school, I had a real truancy problem. I skipped class. I had A's in the classes I loved, and I had D's because in the gifted program, they never flunked you, even though I should have failed. They gave me these like pity D's. I had D's in the classes I couldn't stand and literally never went to. But I also saw this girl who had given up on herself, who really felt like she was dumb. That's the thing I think was the hardest for me to go back and see that negative trajectory, that downward trajectory of a girl who really started out so bright, so excited, and didn't receive the help she needed and really lost faith in herself. That was really emotional.
Do you think about how your life might have been different had you been diagnosed? Did you know of any girls being diagnosed when you were not
Oh,
diagnosed? Yeah, we were
no, not
talking.
at all. I'm old enough. Junior kindergarten teacher, actually, I was left-handed and she forced me to become right-handed. I'm old enough to have had a teacher who was that draconian. My mother always laughed about it. Oh, isn't that funny that she made you do that? There's legitimate research into how damaging it can be to switch a child like that. I don't actually spend much time thinking about how my life would be different. How do I even begin that? I feel like my entire life's passion has been to educate and advocate and to help other women and or to help children, to help girls and teenagers. So many of us who are diagnosed in adulthood immediately turn around and become advocates because that's what we need to do, right? It's that ADHD impulse to how do I make sense of this very tragic experience from childhood? I'm going to try to help as many people as possible. I love when I see women who are diagnosed and then immediately turn around and do some big, huge thing involving ADHD.
Uh-huh, like
Right?
yourself. Yeah. So you mentioned being in therapy. When did you start being going to therapy and why?
I started going to therapy in university because I really felt like there was something wrong with me.
Was it an eating disorder?
No, it wasn't
No.
even the eating
No.
disorder necessarily. That came later. But I think there was this feeling of, I really want to do well. I was an intelligent person. I just couldn't study. I just didn't have the right study habits. There were these moments where even when I did read the book, I couldn't process the information. I just didn't have a language for that. I ended up feeling like a failure all the time. I kept hearing those voices of my teachers saying, oh, you just need to try harder. You just need to work. You just need to study. You just need to get more organized. What that ended up looking like for me was going to a psychiatrist and saying, I'm depressed and
Mm.
getting diagnosed with depression. And it makes sense. I was depressed, but my therapists over the years never looked at what's behind that. What's the root of that? It's mostly let's work on being not depressed.
There wasn't the same awareness even with therapists, I think.
Yeah.
So you are now a committed partner of our mission, and I wanted to ask you what that means for you and how you feel about the need to diagnose girls at an early age.
Gosh, going back to that question of how might my life have been different, it's so important because there is so much grief in an adult diagnosis. So many of us are diagnosed with depression and anxiety for a reason, which is we spend so much time trying really hard to jam that square peg into a round hole, we end up with frustration and that question of what's wrong with me. Both of my children have been diagnosed with ADHD,
Yeah.
and I have a boy and a girl. When I was diagnosed, I immediately knew my son had it because he and I are cut from the same cloth. We have very similar mannerisms and very similar processing issues and memory issues. My daughter, on the other hand, is very together. She is very structured and did really well in school. She's a senior in high school now. I thought there's no way she has ADHD because she doesn't struggle in school. I never thought she had ADHD, but until I started interviewing other women for the podcast, I started to see this same type, the same personality of a girl who did really well in school, really held it together, but then ended up white knuckling it so much through life that she ended up with severe depression and anxiety. My daughter I was seeing that pattern in her in high school where if she didn't get a 95, she would cry, right? She called me once from school because she found out from her French teacher that she was getting a 75, not even a final grade on her midterm report card. She was getting a 75 and she had a panic attack. She couldn't stop crying. She called me from the
Oh,
bathroom and said, "You have to come
wow.
pick me up." And I
Oh,
thought, that's
extreme.
not okay. That's extreme. I never would have thought that was another version of ADHD or another presentation of ADHD until I started interviewing one after the other, seeing that similar story. And so I'm grateful because my parenting has changed dramatically since I was diagnosed and since both of my kids were diagnosed. Being able to see those two different presentations, I think, is so important.
Back to the mission of the Inattentive ADHD Council. How do you see that happening, that we could find more girls at an earlier age so you maybe help eliminate some of this toll that comes in later years?
What I love about the mission of Find the ADHD Girls is the very concrete criteria, which is if anybody in your family is diagnosed with ADHD, everybody in the family should be looked at, right? We know it's genetic. To even understand that, to raise that awareness among family units, and also the psychoeducation for teachers, for parents, I think is the most important thing we can do, which is really making more widespread what ADHD can look like, especially in different presentations, especially in attentive.
It's interesting to me that nobody pointed out, no teacher ever wondered about your daughter. It was really up to you to suss that out.
When I applied for a 504 for my daughter when she was diagnosed in eighth, I was made to feel like I was some kind of tiger mom
Wow.
because my daughter already had 90s. A lot of the teachers, even the psychologists, were sitting in the boardroom saying, "She's not struggling in school. I don't know what the big deal is. Why are you asking for accommodations?" I really had to explain to them, she doesn't look like she's struggling.
Such a good.
But the big question is, at what cost are people succeeding, right? One of the things I had to explain to them, and this is with both my kids, they hold it together in school. And then the minute they walk through the door, they fall apart,
Yeah.
right? So for my son, it was tears. My daughter, it was rage. But
Uh,
both of them, it was really just that I'm finally in a safe place. I can finally relax and let it all out and process all of this. I remember trying to explain that to the school psychologist, and she said to me, "That sounds like a home problem, not a school problem."
Interesting.
And that's where I was like, oh, okay.
They weren't seeing anything.
They said they're
So,
not struggling.
was there something that they missed, do you think, that would have been a sign in school?
Great question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think maybe both of my kids will say, I only got a 92, right? Some of that disappointment, even when you are clearly succeeding
But
and
that's also
seeing
the
the
ridiculous
internalized pressure.
standard for,
Um,
yeah.
for me, I've always felt like the key indicator with ADHD is frustration, right? It's the difference between desire and ability. When we're talking about depression, when we're talking about anxiety, more from a mental health counseling point of view, the For me, the thing to look for is the frustration, because these are not kids who don't care. These are not kids who might act
Yeah,
like they don't care, but
yeah,
really it's because at some point when they're not getting the help they need,
yeah,
they do stop caring. That's what I did. I did stop caring. So it
yeah.
was this idea of if we can catch them early enough, we can start to see the frustration. I do want to do this. If I could, I would pick that up younger before they give up on themselves, which is what I did.
How do you see that happening, picking them up younger? Do you have a vision?
I think the big question, and how my parenting has changed significantly too because of this, is understanding that if you're not doing something, it's what help do you need? Coming from that point of view of not punishing somebody, not immediately punishing a kid or immediately admonishing them, saying, we know this has to get done. So what can I do to help you? And it's such a simple question and it makes all the difference. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they're not going to know what help they need, but it's recognizing that they have support and they have unconditional support. They have somebody who's on their side and they're is curious about, okay, what tools can we use? What's going to work? Just somebody who's willing to work with them as opposed to them feeling like they're going to get in trouble somehow if they don't perform.
I'm wondering, among your podcasts, is there a favorite one? Is there one that stands out for you with really good advice? Me, of course, but
I
after
know, they're all my babies. I know. I took a break a couple summers ago because I was getting burnt out and I was going back to grad school. And so I took a break and reran my top 10 episodes. Everybody's my
that.
favorite. These were mostly just episodes that I felt like maybe didn't get as many listens the first time around, that I felt really were really special. I will say the interview with Sari Solden was really meaningful for me because her books were made all the difference. And her workbook with, oh God, I'm so bad with names. Sari Solden
Terry,
wrote it with, oh,
Terry, somebody?
anyway, the Radical Guide workbook
Okay.
is so wonderful. But yeah, that was really special to me that I was able to interview her, and certainly memorable. But I've had so many wonderful guests. One of my favorites is also a woman who wrote to me and said, all of your guests really seem to have it all together.
Hmm.
And it makes me feel like a bit of a failure because I don't feel like I have it all together. And I wrote her and I said, we often don't think, none of us feels like we have it all together. I think we tend to overlook our strengths. And so I reached out to her and I said, I would love to talk to you about this topic. And so we had an interview and it was one of my favorite just because she was so phenomenal and bright and interesting, as all my guests are. We talked about how mindset and what we pay attention to is really important with ADHD and our sense of self and our narrative, and how that is really what is the most important thing that we need to work on, especially with an adult diagnosis, really viewing ourselves through this new lens. She has now become an ADHD coach. We talk about this journey that she's taken. And I find that just really beautiful and kind of true to what I was saying earlier. I just love when a diagnosis kind of leads to such important advocacy work.
So you're doing coaching as well as the podcast. You're coaching a lot of clients.
Yes.
Yeah, mostly women. Do you?
Yeah, I've only worked with women actually. So I'm in school right now for mental health counseling. One of the reasons why I went back to grad school was because I realized through my diagnosis that I'm not, even though I dropped out of high school and then went back, and even though I dropped out of university and then eventually went back, I realized, oh, I'm not the problem, right? I'm not the dumb one. So thanks to my diagnosis, I've now been able to go back to grad school. Eventually would like to become a therapist to work with clients who are depressed and anxious, to be able to see neurodivergence in teen girls and in women, just to be able to help from that point of view, because I feel like I love coaching and I feel like coaching and therapy work hand in hand really well for ADHD brains. I just would like to have to come at it from both angles.
So what do you think you'd gain from being a coach to a counselor?
Good question. Part of me feels like I was being a therapist with my clients
A
and feeling like this is maybe not ethical. And so I would feel better if I had a license.
little more.
So just give me 3 years and I'll be back. So many of the struggles that we have come down to executive functioning, but also are relational. It's really important to be able to come back, to weave in and out between actions and plans and goals, a lot of the things we focus on with coaching and being forward thinking, but also really looking at what's behind that, what's that about, and really digging into whose voice, which third grade teacher's voice are you hearing when you tell yourself these things, right? We're really working on mindset at the same time. One of the things that's been great about being in the program is learning about the types of questions that can open up a client to feel validated, right? And feel understood and feel like they have a fighting chance. One of the unfortunate things about the program is seeing how little ADHD and autism are understood or talked about in the mental health curriculum, and really realizing that this perspective, this ability to see neurodivergence in clients is something that I'm going to be able to offer the field. So I think the number's certainly growing, but I do think there are very few therapists out there who really understand what this looks like in adult women.
With the women that you coach, and I think this is going to be probably my last question, unless there's more, what advice do you find yourself giving over and over again?
I think the advice I give over and over again is really there is no one quick fix. There's no one tool or strategy that's out there that everybody else knows about and that is suddenly going to be revealed to you at the end of the next book or
Sure.
the end of the next course.
Yeah.
There is no one quick fix. There is no one thing that's going to solve everything. What is going to solve everything is working on the impetus to want to solve everything, right? Oftentimes I will talk to my clients about the fact that there's a million tools out there. You can find them, you can Google them, they're great. There's a lot of things that are going to optimize your life and make them feel better. But what we really have to work on in the first place is to understand that nothing needs to be fixed, right? And how do we reframe the way we look at ourselves and the way we talk about and think about ourselves and how we relate to others? Because if we work on that, then all of those tools are going to be helpful and wonderful, and we'll have our ADHD toolbox and we can look through it and use things, but we won't have that feeling, that constant feeling like it's make or break, right? That I'm still searching for what's going to make me better. And I think it's really, let's get to the bottom of that first.
So maybe the difference is between fixing and managing, I guess, because there
Mm.
to be a lot of management involved. This has been wonderful. I don't know if Cynthia has another question. I'm happy to ask it. Thing I didn't see. Yeah. Oh boy.
And I thought it was
Yeah.
covered a lot of things.
The speed at which you talk, I think, made this more of an hour and a half interview rather than half an hour interview.
It's my favorite topic. Yeah. And I think it is something I'm very passionate about too, right? Because I think we find that with adult diagnosis, especially, is
There's so many dimensions to it. I just find it so fascinating the way some people think it's a character flaw and the things that make it seem like that. And I don't know, the environment that you're in, there's just a lot of depth to it, it seems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Great. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you
And thank
very
you for all the thoughtful questions.
Good luck with your podcast. It's really great to meet you again.
Oh, thank you. All right. Thank you, Catherine. And
I'm here.
Cynthia.
oh, there you are. Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Cynthia.
you. Thank you so much.
All right. Take
See
care.
you again. Bye.
Bye.
We believe all girls with ADHD should get a fair start in life by getting diagnosed by age 8. Visit us at www.findtheadhdgirls.org. Thank you.